Guillem, great to see you and congratulations on yet another book. It's right behind me. It's called The Rise of the Villains. And we're going to be speaking about that in just a moment. But first of all, how many books now have you written?
I have to count them every time, but I just did it recently, so I remember it's 11 books, 2 ebooks that I published myself, and then the rest that just been published mostly by Orion, and mostly first in English, including the authorized biography of Messi. First came out in English, and there's a um, uh, official official history of Barcelona with photographs that's done by an Espanol fan. That's another one. And I just had a meeting with my publishers, and it seems like I've got still books to come.
Breaking news. You can't give us a hint, though, as to what the topic will be.
Early days.
I'll find it out. I'll do some digging. So we're here to talk about The Rise of the Villains, which focuses on Unai Emery's journey. What prompted you to write this book?
Sometimes books come to you more than you go into the books, and this was one of them where it was suggested a few names, and we felt that what Unai Emery could do at Aston Villa at that moment when we discussed it, it was just a potential that had to be fulfilled, but started well. It was the beginning of his time at Aston Villa, and we thought, how about having a look at his story, because of course he's got a pass in the UK with Arsenal. He had unfinished business in the Premier League, so he was going to make sure that he was going to do very well at Aston Villa. And the more I looked at it, not only I realized that Unai Emery has got a massive story of somebody that comes from a background in which many other comes from, the Basque Country. So I wanted to find out more about that. In a time of terrorism at ETA, he was brought up in that world. Does that affect you? With a family that are big personalities, football related. His grandfather was the first goalkeeper to concede a goal in La Liga, because the Real Union goalkeeper. So there was a story of Unai. But then the more I looked at it, I thought, do you know what? Aston Villa, they are disruptors. They're trying to break into the top 6. And that's not easy, but they're doing it now. So if we go and have a look at what they're doing, we'll be able to explain it. Hopefully they'll make it into a new table of 7, or if not, we will see the difficulties that they found to get there, and that has been the, if you like, second part of the book. The first one is Unai. The second one is Aston Villa right now. Who is behind the scenes? What do they do? What's the ambition? How are they doing it? And it became 2 books in one. So I've got 12 books now.
You got a 2 for 1, which is always a bonus. So you touched on it a little bit there. Unai Emery's motivation and the feeling maybe that he had unfinished business in the Premier League from his time at Arsenal. I seem to recall as well, prior to Eddie Howe getting the job at Newcastle, that he was maybe one of the candidates there as well. So was returning back to England always on his radar?
So obviously at Arsenal, he realized that he wasn't protected in the way that he would have liked to do the things that he needed to do. And as soon as the whole thing turned a bit, it was all about him. It went toxic, but it was all about him being there. You take the manager out, fans thought everything sorted. And it wasn't as simple as that. But in the post-Arsene Wenger era, he actually stable, especially in the first year, stable Arsenal. And he would have built from there if his choices of players would have taken, if the people around him would have protected him. He didn't feel that was the case. Got to a point where both club and himself thought, it's time to move on. But what was interesting is that on the back of his, I would call, success at PSG, they were knocked out in the Champions League in the 2 years by Barcelona and Real Madrid, the best Barcelona and the best Real Madrid. Painfully, in the case of Barcelona, but he won leagues, he won cups. So he proven to be a winning manager. And then he goes to Arsenal and, in the Europa League does well, but certainly he knows there is room for improvement and he knows how to act upon that. Wasn't allowed. But generally what you would think, and most managers would do, is like, I want somewhere else where I can prove in the way I'm doing things that I'm good. He did something else. He actually stopped and thought, what's missing for me to actually go to the next level? For me to be in the conversation when the Manchester United job comes up, or the Liverpool one, or the Bayern Munich one. What's missing? And then realized that he was too adaptable, that he was doing things sometimes very reactively, that he actually wanted to be part of the vanguard of coaches that used positional football as the predominant model of our times. So he started studying positional football, what Pep Guardiola had done at Barcelona, at Bayern, at City, and others were doing. He got as an assistant somebody that was an expert on it, and he thought, okay, I'm going to change. And he did that at Villarreal. Now, that to me is a sign of somebody that's humble enough to realize his position in the world, professional well anyway, and hungry and passionate enough to be what he has become now, one of the best at that football. So goes to Villarreal and does very well in the Europa League, wins it, and in the Champions League. So at that point, Newcastle came at the wrong time. Also, there were leaks from Newcastle to the UK media saying, he's coming over in 3 days' time, he's going to be training, he will be at the game on Saturday, whatever. He didn't like any of that. So he thought, no, it's not the right time. He also had a debt to Villarreal owners for having letting him run the team in his own way. By then, he was surrounding himself by the people that understood him, thought like him, worked in the direction he wanted, like individual coaching, somebody like Damien, who was his assistant, but also linked with the club. And then when Aston Villa possibility came up and meeting Nassef Sawiris, and there was that iconic moment in which he gives him a blank piece of paper and he says, do what you want with the club kind of thing. It was difficult to resist. So he wanted to make sure that his assistants were there, that the people were going to help him. And boom, he went into it, beat Manchester United for the first time in 27 years or something. Not in the way that he wanted, in the way the players wanted and the fans wanted, but eventually convinced everyone to do it his way. And he's found the perfect place to have a stable team, a club that protects him and looks after him, and a place to grow.
But this was not a typical Unai Emery gig, at least within the sort of 5 to 7 years on his CV prior, where he was in charge of PSG at the top of the table, Arsenal challenging for honours, Villarreal doing well in Europe. The Villa team that he inherited were in a relegation battle. How was he able to turn things around so quickly?
The first thing to say is that you're absolutely right. That was not what he wanted to do next. And yet the Bayern Munich offer didn't arrive. The Manchester United offer didn't arrive. The Liverpool offer didn't arrive. There was nobody really of that caliber that were calling him. So when Aston Villa came in, he heard ambition, he heard possibilities, he heard Premier League, historic club, and he heard the owner saying yes to everything he needed to succeed. So when he comes in, obviously, it's a team that lacked shape, structure, methodology. They had to work harder in the same direction. He had to filter people, players that weren't good enough or didn't accept his methodology, because he always will have 3 hour-and-a-half meetings with the players a week with 50-minute videos, because that's part of his methodology. That's how he makes people grow. Not everybody accepts it. Within 2 years, 50% of the squad was gone. And meanwhile, he was trying to push his way. And he got to a couple of defeats against Arsenal and Leicester City at home. And after the Leicester City one, he went like, this is not the way. I'm going to do it my way, or I'm just going to go. So you either follow my way, or you're just going to be on your own here. Everybody realized that what he was trying to do, building from the back, all the stuff that we saw in the following years, building from the back, intensity, attacking spaces, all that, being aggressive in pressure, wasn't fully happening. And from then on, something switched. It happens, especially if you work the way he does, not only collectively, but individually. And then the victory started coming. And from a team that was fighting relegation, they ended up in the conference.
2023-2024, the season begins with a 5-1 thrashing against Newcastle United. And you start to think, how's this season going to pan out? The response was a run that would ultimately spearhead Aston Villa qualifying for the Champions League. Monchi came in as well behind the scenes. Talk me through the story of Aston Villa qualifying for the Champions League in Unai Emery's second season in charge.
So we're talking then about Unai Emery that had been 15 consecutive years in Europe. And for him, Europe is everything because it gives him the name, gives him prestige, and he tells the players the same. You're in Europe, you get bigger contracts, you go to bigger clubs, and those nights will be absolutely memorable. So he keeps feeding from Europe and also getting stories from the past, good and bad, that allows him to grow and constantly refers to them. He's got a great detail memory. And that year, even though they were doing well in the conference and got to the semi-finals, there were choices to be made at the end of the season because the team was very tired. And the choice was, let's go for the Champions League. And he knew that if he was left to the last game against Crystal Palace, he would not be good enough. So they needed to get the points early because he saw there was no legs left. The energy was gone. But they managed to do it. And on the back of that, of course, you got a whole squad that now believes in his ideas, know that to get to the best version, they have to push on themselves personally and in their heads. They know that when he reacts strongly against them and tells them off, in the case of McGinn, for instance, or with Morgan Rogers, who sometimes is loved and sometimes is pushed, all that is part of the process of learning and growing. And quite clearly with a fortress at home, that became a reference point for everyone as well. That, with the energy of the fans, they got the points that they needed at the end. And the celebrations were massive. Now, of course, that was helped by a second signings that were coming in and were helping. But more and more, the bigger the stakes, so the following season, for instance, being in the Champions League, the bigger the players and the bigger the expenditure. And I think Aston Villa went to a point where they had to decide, okay, do we slow this down? Or having been in the Champions League, try to do the best in the Champions League, and even in January, bring the likes of Marco Asensio and Marcus Rashford to push on. And it's a gamble. And it's a gamble that in a way pay off, because having those players and doing well means that other players could look at that and say, right, this is a place to go. They're going to look after me. I'm going to improve. But obviously had the other side to it, which is it increases the limitations financially of Aston Villa. People have identified that limit that as they've reached now as the end of a road, as the end of a journey and an adventure. And of course, if the season doesn't start well, that fits into that narrative. Oh my God, this is it. And I even read from Aston Villa fans, Unai has to go now that he's done everything. And he's not understanding what's happening there. He's not getting it at all. And you're an Aston Villa fan. I'm not thinking Aston Villa every day. But okay, I've been privileged to have the information and seen what they're doing in there and realizing that actually, no, it's not the end of the road. It's a progression, it's a rise, but nobody told you it's a straight upward trajectory line, because it never is. So when it goes difficult, when people have to adjust to being in the Champions League, being close to getting to the Champions League again, not having certain players that push things on, and perhaps not even signing enough, all of that means there is a moment in which energy and ideas have to be found. But it may just at the beginning not work fully because of the mentality is not right, because of the balance is not right, because the players are not informed, whatever. I say to Aston Villa fans, if that happens, keep an eye on it. See what the solutions are. See what has been done before. Consult the book. And then realize that you're on a rise, but it's a blip. And as such, don't take massive conclusions. I know. We both know that it doesn't work like that, that people will take whatever conclusion on the back of a game and a result. But if result is all you're interested about, message me on direct message on X, and I'll message you about the result. If that's all you need, that's all you want, that's it. But they are in a process. It's a story that's wonderful to follow because they continue pushing to be one of the top 6 clubs in the land. And let's see if they get it or not, but they're still working on it.
You touched on it a little bit there, Aston Villa's finances. How much of a challenge was the PSR situation in writing this book? Because it's always evolving, the cycle is always changing. So as you're writing it, the financial situation can ultimately paint a different picture. And after you've published it, more financial information can come to light as well. I think a lot of Villa fans felt, for example, when John Duran went to Saudi, they might be able to spend, but then we learned the PSR position was still very tight, and maybe that was more of a forced sale. What is your perspective on Villa's finances, and how has that impacted or even hampered Unai Emery?
Well, in reference to the book, I didn't want to make it a story of the season. I'd done that with the Pochettino book, Brave New World, and that worked very well because he was a bit of a mystery, and Spurs at that point were doing things in a new way. But I didn't want to do a story of the season. There are a lot of stories from the season, and of course the context of the situation. But once you put out there, because it's a movable feast, once you put out there that there is an obstacle, this is the obstacle, there's a limit of wages, there's a limit how much you can spend. I leave that story because it keeps moving, and go to the person that deal with it, the people that deal with it, and how they go through a summer where they cannot sleep, where they are in the beach and constantly have to be on the phone, where they try deals, including conversations, private conversations with players that don't come off, well, the frustration of that, the battles amongst themselves, how the owner is trying to get information and what kind of information he gets and what's the reaction to that. I'm more interested about how the people inside deal with the difficulties with it, even with the feeds, with what may be considered at the time by the media, by the fans, mini crisis, how people deal with that. And not just Unai or Damia or Monchi, but the head of comms, the player liaison. How do they deal with players that go to the player liaison to say, he's not playing me, but why is he not playing me? And the player liaison has to listen, but has to say, maybe there is a reason. Let me find out the reason. I'll come back to you. And all that, what happens in a crisis, what happens in difficulties. I was more interested about the personal reaction of it, because you can get, when you start getting into numbers and so on, it gets boring in a book. But also, without going microscopic about it, you can take a few steps back and say, look, if Birmingham was in London, different story. If Birmingham was a tourist destination, different story. So you also can tell, okay, yeah, there's a difficulty of trying to push to the top six. There's a bigger issue here, that the stadium is not big enough. It doesn't bring enough money. There is not enough income. And they still, they're still regularly now in Europe, and they're still, at least in my eyes, fighting to be one of the top 6 clubs in the land, or 7.
How hard do you think it is and was for Unai Emery to have 2 loanees, as you've just mentioned, in Rashford and Asensio, both very positive, but then they're gone? And even this season, Jadon Sancho also only a loan as well. Presumably some of those deals are down to the players, but others are factoring in Villa's PSR situation. So it creates a situation, doesn't it, where on paper you strengthen your squad, but as the manager, those players might have a very short tenure at the football club.
He doesn't care. He doesn't mind. He wants the structure, the system, the process to get the best out of them as soon as possible. And then if they go, they go. They try to keep Marco Asensio, but it's 20% taxes in Turkey, and the kind of money that he demanded, it just didn't work out. But also, in a way, I guess there was a discussion within the coaching staff. Perhaps the number 10 role should be given to Morgan Rogers, and then build a team around that. In any case, with Marcus Rashford, everybody knew he wanted to go to Barcelona from day one. Everybody knew that. But there was great conversations had, and I've been privy to the content of them, between Marcus Rashford and Unai Emery, where Unai found a player that was almost like an under-18s, just going like, I'm so excited about doing this, about coming, and I know what you can do. I've spoken to my England colleagues. I'm coming in with a lot of hunger. And then he's a bit of ice. It's difficult to go through Marcus Rashford. So how do you do that? How do you get through him? Is it by taking him aside and doing individual coaching, or giving him information, or just wait until one moment, which is what happened. He goes like, oh, can I have more of that individual coaching and more of that video? And he creates his own menu. And then you could see that he was growing, and also it's helping to go to Barcelona because the positional game is similar. So now he knows the responsibilities, that defensive responsibilities as well, of a forward in his position. And Unai is fine with that. Now, okay, they're going. Can we get somebody with a similar profile, with these needs that we've got for the team, etc.? And we'll work on them. It doesn't always work. And Jadon Sancho is going to be a challenge, but an interesting challenge, because that's how they all see it. It's like, all right, how can we get this guy to be the Jadon Sancho that we've seen in the past? And let's see. So far, so good. They're not broken toys, but I kind of think of another sentence for it. But those players that could have been more, he loves them because he thinks, in my hands, you're going to be more. And he told Marcus Rashford, you'll be back to England. And in no time, he was back into the England national side. So he's not, don't call it a miracle worker. It's a lot of work behind. But if they're here with him, great. If they're gone, somebody else will come.
Just on Emery's mentality, does he like this tag that he's a Europa League specialist because he's won it so many times?
Tags come from media perceptions or fans' perceptions, and that stay at the gate of the training ground. Doesn't go in. And I give you an example of that. When I went recently, 3 weeks ago or so, to take the book to him, the season hadn't started well. And of course, I listened to Aston Villa fans. I hadn't spoken to him since the beginning of the season. And there was this impression that perhaps trying to do the same thing wouldn't work, that maybe there has to be an adjustment somewhere because the team seems so flat. Is there anything new that can be done? So I came with that idea, and then we're discussing the season, and then I mentioned that, and this idea that the change has to be made is a media perception, is a fan perception, and I was affected by it. So a couple of hours later, we were going to take a picture with the book, and he started having a go at me. So you're so negative, and come with this negativity, and da 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 da. And it's very rare for me to actually be described as negative, but secondly, to fall into that trap of projecting what's outside that world into that world. And my fault was double, because I shouldn't do it. But certainly, having been a year there, I should have remembered that it's got no effect to them. It's got no importance. They're in the process. Not everybody understands it. Nobody knows what it is that they're doing. But because I was privileged to know a little bit, I shouldn't have come out with that cloud from the outside in, because he doesn't want to know. He doesn't read the papers. Reads like 6 or 7 Spanish papers mostly about what's going on back in his land. But tags, he just doesn't care. I mean, what he sees, he knows what he is. He knows his weaknesses and strengths. Nothing outside will disturb me. So he was trying to tell me, it's not change that's required. It's more of the same. And let's work on what people are strong at. Let's find what we can get from the new guys. Let's get people that are out of form in form. That has always been the job. So, lesson learned. But when you talk about tag and what people consider him, he doesn't care. He does say that Europe is massive for him. He will always repeat that, because it's giving him everything. He's giving him the prestige, the money, the possibility to be Aston Villa. But if people think he's just a good evening man and whatever else, which he wanted to copyright, by the way, that was finding that out. That was quite funny. It's just up to them. Yes, sometimes when it gets toxic, like it did at Arsenal, it hurts, because it means that he cannot explain at that point what he's doing or what he would like to do. And there were things inside the camp, namely Ozil, that were conspiring against him. So there was a lot of things to fight and not enough people to fight it with. So he was more annoyed at the fact that he was on his own, that at the fact that people thought whatever they thought of him. And unfinished business for him was to return to the Premier League and says, no, I can do it with my way of doing it, which is proven to be the case.
Just a quick word on last season. What's Unai Emery's assessment of it? Villa didn't get Champions League. They finished in 6th place. And you mentioned, interestingly, in the season they did get Champions League football, he wanted points in the bag because maybe he felt they'd be burned out towards the end of the season. And yet last season, I think Villa managed to win 8 of their last 10 games, despite missing out on a top 5 finish.
Yeah, their problem was the 5 draws at home. One less, it would have been different, and that was the annoyance. But in the last game against Manchester United at halftime, well, he told everyone not to tell him what the other results were. It was all about getting a result at Old Trafford, which didn't happen. And he was disappointed at the end, and there was that moment where he starts looking at the distance, because there was so much in his head, so much more than people know. Well, the people will know now because it's in the book. But there was a lot in his head, and it was a moment that it was like a emotional volcano inside. That was his feeling at the time. That needed to come out somehow, and it did. But considering that in January, February, it didn't look like they were even going to make it to Europe, it seemed. Not to win the Champions League was disappointing. But very, very quickly, it became, but we are in the Europa League. They needed a rest. They needed to overcome the disappointment, but they are in the Europa League. And as you can see, and having just beaten Feyenoord away, it's a competition that everybody feels looking forward to playing. And in my eyes, it's perhaps right now in the situation and the squad that they've got is the one they belong to. And then, if they win it, they'll be in the Champions League next year and maybe in a better position to get some players that can help them do well then.
And if we finish up with this season, there was that momentum, even though the Manchester United result stopped them qualifying for the Champions League. But those 8 wins out of 10 should still give you a building block. But then it was in many ways a summer of uncertainty. Monchi ended up departing. Some of the players we thought might leave are still at Aston Villa, but maybe there's an effect on interest in Emi Martinez or Ollie Watkins, though they're both still there in Villa shirts. How do you explain the summer? And do you think some of that uncertainty has led to this indifferent start in the league for Aston Villa?
Yeah, I think there was a period where expectations were big. Obviously, you come on the back of Asensio and Rashford, say, and on the verge of the Champions League, you want to build on that. But then you soon realize that, in fact, what has to happen is to reduce the wages. What has to happen is that, a homeboy has to leave, and Jacob Ramsey. So with that created an atmosphere inside and outside the camp of disappointment. So the season didn't start well. Even at Villa Park, I think fans were not at the races, neither were the players. Obviously, Unai always say how much he needs the fans, and he absolutely means it. That energy that they bring, that enthusiasm that they bring, that when they're down, they help them. All that was a little bit missing. But of course, the fans will tell you the players weren't given as much. Yes, that's right. Some players are in a very good form. And Ollie Watkins will look bad if he doesn't receive the service. And Morgan Rogers is 22. Perhaps he's going through one of those periods in which he's got to learn and dig deep to actually come back to the form that everybody expects. New players have to be adapted. So there was a lot of things that was verging towards me coming to Unai in the training ground and saying, you have to change things. A lot of negativity, or not everybody was in the same place. And that is little by little changing on the back of victories. Performances can improve for sure, but 3 wins in a row make everybody look life in a different way. The atmosphere is different in the changing room. And now, all right, who else can add? Because we're still talking about Tielemans coming back from injury, be fully fit. As we're saying, the likes of Morgan Rogers finding his role in the side. Emi Martinez has to shake up whatever he had in his head, and now he's injured. So there's still things going on, but it feels like wins will help everybody settle. And from here, you'll see, I'm sure, better performances. Let's see results, but certainly better performances. The weaknesses are clear. I think it will be corrected in January. They need more pace up front. They need white players. And that perhaps, again, it was the disappointment of not having those players to work on for now. But all in all, it's a process that it's taking Aston Villa where it is now, and there is still room for improvement. The results at the beginning of the season may not say so. The results now may look that way. It'll be up and down. I do believe it's going to be a hard season, and the signings on January will be important, but I wouldn't bet on Aston Villa qualifying for Europe again and doing well in the Europa League.
And how does Roberto Alabe change things following the departure of Monchi?
So with Monchi, there was a lot of focus, of course, on the now, and they wanted to get the best deals with the constraints that they had, and they got really good deals, and they prepared all the youngsters coming through, etc. With Roberto Alabe, while Unai remains in the now, he wants results now, he wants players that make an impact now. Roberto Alabe will have an impact on the medium and long term. So to start with, kicks away the idea, I don't know where it came from, that Unai was leaving or whatever. Unai chooses Roberto Alabe. They work together. There's a lot of stories of them too at Almeria and after in the book. The relationship is very, very close, but they represent two different things. They've always wanted to work together, having done it at Almeria again. And there were times where it almost happened, because the push of Unai and the passion of Unai to shape the side constantly, centimeter by centimeter, it goes in contraposition to Roberto Alabe, who looks at the bigger picture. And perhaps the new Aston Villa, this is me saying that, but especially with Roberto Alabe, with the success that he had, firming philosophy of players coming through, of an idea of football, etc. Perhaps they can focus more on that, on creating a pattern of players that come into the first team. And maybe Unai, if Roberto convinces him, maybe Unai should allow 2 or 3 players to get it right and wrong, as they are 18, 19, 20, impressing and bringing something new, and not focusing so much on the now, because the now requires perhaps a lot of money that's not there, that has to come in as income. And the income will increase, but maybe not at the pace that Unai will want those big players to come in. Meanwhile, Roberto can actually say, yeah, okay, but I'm going to be looking after this other part, and I'm going to bring you players that will be useful to you eventually.
There has been, and there will continue to be, a lot of speculation about Villa outgoings. Morgan Rogers next summer, Emi Martinez, Manchester United last summer, Ollie Watkins, Arsenal and Manchester United over the last 2 windows. Villa's financial situation has led them to have to sanction some sales in the past. But presumably, this is not a football club now that view themselves as a selling club.
Everybody's got to understand where Aston Villa is. And if to move forward, you need to sell, they will do so, obviously. What club doesn't do that? Maybe the clubs that have got the biggest amount of money. But they are a club, like most, that for the right figure, but the right figure in some cases, you're talking to big names, is a big figure, can mean a transfer. It can. But what they will never do, and Unai will never allow this to do it, is selling a player to fill gaps or to pay debts. It has to be as part of a bigger process that has to do, if eventually Morgan Rogers, you decide to sell Morgan Rogers, make sure that you've got something in place for that to be replaced immediately. But obviously Morgan Rogers was not for sale this summer. So it's that he has to arrive at the right moment, when perhaps Morgan feels he's learning off, perhaps he feels that to push on he's got to go somewhere else, perhaps the club feels that that's the case. If they found themselves in that position in 4 or 5 years' time, then that will happen. 3 years, whatever. And what people have to understand is that the project continues in the hands of people that have responded well to those situations and that have got solutions, because they would have studied them in detail. So no club is alien to that. but it won't be done as a solution to fill a gap, because then they will become a different type of club. This is a club that is growing. They want to do it with the players that I've got there and new coming in. But if some have to go, some will have to go.
So bringing it back to the book, it is, of course, called The Rise of the Villains. And presumably you wanted that word rise very specifically in the title. So that begs this final question. How far can Aston Villa rise?
We don't know. And yes, I wanted the rise word in it. And there was a discussion about it, because it's like, oh, how about if they reach the top? How about if when the book comes out? Because obviously the name gets picked a year earlier, a year before it comes out. How about if it's not a rise? And I said, look, after looking at what's going on inside, it is a rise. It has been a rise, and it will continue to be a rise. But as I said, it won't be just a continuous straight line. How far they can go, it depends on so many factors. Obviously, they don't want to build a new stadium, but the stadium will grow, will bring more money. There's a new president of business operations. He's got to double up income, but in a very short period, the previous one actually doubled up the money that was coming in. So there's a possibility of keep growing. But I said the limits. It's based in Birmingham. Birmingham is growing, and at some point when the fast train comes in, maybe we'll be talking differently. But it's still Birmingham. It's not London. It's not Manchester either. In terms of the money that comes in and the money of people that come in and are not unhappy to spend £1,000 in a game. That doesn't happen. It happens at other clubs. So there is a limit. But these people inside, they are disruptors, and you need to understand that in a positive way. People that say, yeah, I know that's the way, or others have taken the way, we're going to take another way. We're going to ask if the rules are right. We're going to try to see if we can push on. And with that mentality, that can take Aston Villa still far. Perhaps next is stability. Perhaps next is continuous years in Europe. But, we're talking about 3 years. For a club to jump status requires a decade or more. And hopefully it'll be done faster, and hopefully with Unai Emery in the realms for a long time. But if not, in my eyes, they have now the structure, the processes, and the ambition to continue to rise.
So The Rise of the Villains inside Unai Emery's Aston Villa Revolution came out on the 25th of September. Orion Publishing Group are the publisher, and the book features exclusive interviews with Unai Emery, Monchi, Ollie Watkins, John McGinn, Pau Torres, and more. Guillem, where can people find the book?
You'll find it in any bookstore, in Amazon, of course, as well. And if you want it signed, I don't know when you're going to bring this interview out, but on the 15th of October, we are at the Witton Arms with an amazing Aston Villa night with Ian Taylor, Andy Townsend, Alec McAnally, Stan Petrov, James Chester, and some of the people within the club that tells you how it all works, like the head of cuisine, the head of player liaison, head of comms. They will come in, and there will be music. There's a comedian. We raffle stuff. We're raising money for Children's Hospital in Birmingham, and also for Biggleswade United, the club I'm the chairman of. And at the end, we'll be signing books as well, and you can buy them there. So 15th of October, 7 p.m, Witton Arms, if you're in the area.
Top stuff, Guillem. Congratulations on yet another amazing book. Good luck with the continued launch and promotion, and thank you so much for being so generous as ever with your time.
Thank you, Ben, for looking after books. Thank you.